which is the world of pure consciousness, which is at the highest level of the cosmos. We haven't evolved up from matter. We've devolved or come down from pure consciousness or spirit. And the main purpose of human life is to return to that level of pure consciousness. And the great wisdom traditions of the world all have different systems of meditation and yoga and contemplation and prayer that are meant to help us do that, restore consciousness to its original pure state, which is eternal, full of knowledge, and full of pleasure. That is our natural condition. That's why we feel uncomfortable on this level of reality, because we're not eternal. We find ourselves subject to death and disease, and we don't feel full of knowledge. We feel that there's knowledge that's being hidden from us. We don't know everything we need to know, and we also don't feel unmixed pleasure. But these things, the reason why we feel uncomfortable in a world where there is death, where there is suffering, where there is ignorance, is because by nature we are eternal. By nature we are full of knowledge. By nature we are full of pleasure. And that's why we feel uncomfortable in the situation in which we find ourselves now. But our current education system doesn't give any solution to this problem. It just drives us deeper into death, ignorance, and suffering.
Can you talk a little bit about the cave site in South Africa, which you call the Cradle of Lies, the Sterkfontein Cave?
Yes. The Sterkfontein Caves are an archaeological site in South Africa. It's a place where scientists have discovered bones of an ape man called Australopithecus, who they believe lived about 3 or 4 million years ago in Africa. And they consider this little ape man to be our human ancestor. They believe that we modern human beings, came from this little 3.5 foot tall ape man called Australopithecus that lived in Africa 3 or 4 million years ago. And the Sterkfontein Caves are one of the main places where the fossils of this ape man were found. And therefore, they call this place the Cradle of Humanity, because it's the place of our distant ancestors. That's what they would say. It's actually a United Nations World Heritage Site. But I don't believe that's true. It's just a propaganda effort to support the Darwinian theory of evolution, and that's why I call it a cradle of lies, not the cradle of humanity, because I think it's a lie that human beings evolved from apes or ape men. We didn't evolve from Australopithecus. Human beings have always been present on Earth, and there's evidence to show that. For example, elsewhere in Africa, there are fully modern human footprints that have been found in layers of rock almost 4 million years old. These are the footprints discovered by Mary Leakey at a place called Laetoli in the country of Tanzania. And in her original report, published in National Geographic magazine, she said these footprints are indistinguishable from modern human footprints, and they're found in layers of rock 3,700,000 years old, the same age as our so-called ancestor, Australopithecus, who didn't have feet like a modern human being. This creature had feet like a chimpanzee. Plus, you've got human skeletons that are 3 or 4 million years old, such as the human skeletons that were found by the Italian geologist Giuseppe Ragazzoni at a place called Castanedolo in northern Italy. He found these anatomically modern human skeletons in layers of rock between 3 and 4 million years old, the same age as the Sterkfontein cave discoveries of Australopithecus. So I think it's a lie that Sterkfontein is the cradle of humanity. I don't think it should be presented that way. for me, it's a cradle of lies.
I thought it was very interesting to note that the Rockefellers were heavily involved in funding and then not funding archaeology.
Yes, this happened specifically in China. The Rockefeller Foundation was very interested in promoting materialistic view of science because they wanted to understand human nature so that they would be able to control it. That's one reason why they were engaged in this ape-man research, because they thought, okay, if human beings came from apes, we should try to understand that, and that will help us in our attempts to control human beings in society today for our purposes. So the Rockefeller Foundation was involved in funding the Beijing man discoveries that were made in the 1920s. And these discoveries involved finding bones of a fossil ape man called Homo erectus near Beijing, China, in the Shuqutian Mountains. And they funded this research very heavily as part, ultimately, of a program to understand and control human nature. Of course, it's based on a completely wrong idea that we evolved from the apes. That really isn't true. And we actually have another purpose. So they treat us on the basis of their understanding of where we came from. Scientists treat us in a particular way, like we're just some evolved ape, we're just another kind of animal, we're just purely material beings, and we should just keep our mouths shut, work hard, produce and consume more and more material things. That's their view of human civilization. But I'm proposing something else. We didn't evolve from apes. We're fallen angels, really, in the sense that we're beings of pure consciousness, originally from some higher level of the cosmos. Now we've come down to this level of matter, but we need to go back to our original position. That's my position. I think there should be foundations that support that, rather than foundations that support the idea that, yes, we're just evolved apes, we're just chemical machines in competition with each other for survival.
Don't you ever get frustrated?
No, I don't, because I understand that it would be nice to be living at a time when my ideas were the dominant ideas. That would certainly be nice, but I understand that's not always the position. And I'm happy with the position I'm in. You could say, well, like Columbo, to whom you compared me. He had a sense of humor.
Indeed.
It seems he never got really frustrated, no matter what attempts were made to obstruct his investigations. He always kept his sense of humor.
He kept a sense of humor, but he never let up.
And he never let up either. That's right. So maybe it's an apt comparison. I'm the same way. I keep my sense of humor, and I don't give up. And one of the things that inspires me is the reactions that I get from people all over the world who appreciate what I'm doing and encourage me to keep on going. One of the things that keeps me going is the letters that I get from archaeology students who tell me that my work has really opened their eyes to new possibilities. And sometimes I even learn some interesting things from archaeology students. There was one archaeology student who wrote to me, and he said he was out on an excavation with his professor, and he just happened to ask his professor, well, what if human beings have been here for longer than we think possible? And his professor told him, I've got a book you should read. And his professor brought out his own personal copy of my book, Forbidden Archaeology, and gave it to the student.
That's awesome.
And he read it. So it's things like that that kind of keep me going, to know that there's a professor who's secretly reading my book, and when he finds a student who might be interested and he gives it. You know, I always have been fascinated with the process by which ideas come from being underground to being mainstream. This happens in all kinds of fields. It may happen in fashion, for example. There may be some fashion designer who just sees some kids in Paris dressing in a certain way, and then it becomes mainstream. So a lot of times things happen like that. Things circulate a little